The searing air of the Valley of the Kings shimmers above the sand, and almost complete silence hangs in the air, broken only by the occasional gust of wind and the pounding hearts of a group of people frozen before a black void in the rock. After decades of searching and months of painstaking work, they stand before an untouched tomb. The seal on the door has been intact for 3,500 years. What awaits them inside? Mountains of gold? Unspeakable treasures? Or a pharaoh's deadly curse? The truth turned out to be far more shocking. What they discovered in this tomb didn't just leave them speechless. It called into question everything we know about ancient Egypt and our place in the universe. Welcome, all truth seekers, to our channel. We're here to pull back the curtain on the mysteries that official history prefers to ignore. If you enjoy enigmas that make you see the world in a new way, you are in the right place. Take a second to subscribe and hit the notification bell. By doing so, you'll join our community of explorers and help us in our search for answers to the most incredible questions of the past. When we think of the Valley of the Kings, we imagine the greatest names in history. Tutankhamun, whose golden mask became the symbol of Egypt; Ramesses the Great, the builder of Abu Simbel; Seti I, whose tomb dazzles with its painted walls. It seemed that by the mid-20th century, the valley had given up all its major secrets. All the great tombs had been mapped, and most, alas, had been looted in antiquity. But in academic circles, in the quiet of libraries, among dusty papyri, a phantom has haunted the field for decades. The phantom of a pharaoh who seemed to both exist and not exist at the same time. He was a ruler of the 18th dynasty, the era of Egypt's greatest glory. His name survived in only a few fragmented, faded texts. Neb-heren. The translation of his name was itself intriguing: Lord of the Sky, or Master of the Horizon. But beyond the name, almost nothing was known. His cartouches did not adorn temple walls. His statues did not line the avenues. His name had been subjected to what the Romans would later call damnatio memoriae, a damnation of memory. It was as if he had been deliberately erased from history. The official version was that he had a short reign, and his tomb was probably small, insignificant, and long lost to the sands or destroyed by robbers. Most Egyptologists simply wrote him off. But not all. Dr. Anu Sharma, the head of an international archaeological mission, was obsessed with finding Neb-heren. She believed that you could erase a name from history, but not a tomb. She believed the Lord of the Sky was still waiting for his moment somewhere beneath the silent cliffs. But how do you search for something that officially doesn't exist? Her team decided to take a different approach. Instead of relying on old maps and luck, they brought the latest ground-penetrating radar to the valley, a device capable of seeing through tens of meters of solid rock, like an X-ray. It was like giving the entire planet an ultrasound. Month after month, under the scorching Egyptian sun, they methodically scanned section after section, especially those areas considered empty and geologically unpromising. Their colleagues laughed at them, calling it a ghost hunt. But one day, on the laptop screen connected to the radar, a faint, barely perceptible response appeared. An anomaly. A rectangular cavity located much deeper than any other tomb in a sector that was believed to be solid bedrock. The most grueling months began. Breaking through tens of meters of solid rock was a titanic effort. And then, when all hope was nearly lost, a worker's pickaxe struck emptiness. When they cleared the debris, the first step cut into the rock was revealed. Then a second, a third. They descended deep into the darkness. The hearts of the entire team pounded as they went down the long staircase. The air grew cool and still, and in the light of their flashlights, they saw it. A door. A simple rectangle, blocked with stones and covered in plaster. And on the plaster, untouched by time, was the seal. The sacred seal of the necropolis, the god Anubis as a jackal, seated above 9 bound captives. This was it, the holy grail of Egyptology. An unbroken seal meant only one thing. No one had been beyond this door for 3,500 years. They had found him, the phantom Pharaoh, the lord of the sky, and the silence of 3.5 millennia was about to be broken. A sense of euphoria mixed with an almost religious awe swept over the team. This was the moment they would tell their grandchildren about, the moment that would write their names into history, an untouched Pharaoh's tomb. This was no forced entry. Every stone, every grain of plaster from the ancient seal was carefully removed, photographed, and catalogued. When a small opening was made in the wall, Dr. Sharma, as the expedition leader, was the first to shine a flashlight inside. The smell. That was the first thing that hit them. A dry, spicy scent of air that had been trapped for 3,500 years. Beyond this door, they expected to find a world of gods and gold, just as Howard Carter had seen in the tomb of Tutankhamun. Bright colors covering the walls from floor to ceiling, hieroglyphs telling of the pharaoh's journey to the afterlife, images of Anubis, Osiris, Ra. But they were met with silence. A visual silence. A long, perfectly straight corridor stretched into the rock, but its walls were almost bare. It was a cold, polished surface of dark stone that seemed alien to this place. There were no gods, no judgment scenes, no spells. Only occasionally, at great distances from each other, were strange, out-of-place patterns carved. They weren't hieroglyphs. They were complex spirals, like galaxies, and groups of dots connected by thin lines. These symbols had nothing in common with the Egyptian canon. They looked more like schematics or astronomical diagrams. The first seed of unease and bewilderment was planted. Hope still flickered. Perhaps the pharaoh had ordered the corridor to be left bare so that all the splendor would be concentrated in the main burial chamber. With bated breath, the team walked down the silent corridor and entered the central hall. But the burial chamber was even more shockingly empty. No golden shrines nested one inside the other, no canopic jars holding internal organs, no statues of guardian gods, no dismantled chariots or thrones. The air was empty. The walls were just as bare and polished as in the corridor. In the absolute center of this void, like a period at the end of a sentence, stood it, the only object in the room. A sarcophagus. And even it was wrong, utterly wrong. Archaeologists were accustomed to 2 types of royal sarcophagi, either lavish ones of pure gold and precious stones, like Tutankhamun's, or massive ones of red granite, covered with hieroglyphs and figures of deities. This one was like neither of them. It was a perfect rectangular monolith carved from a single black basalt. Its surface was so smooth and polished that it seemed to absorb the light from their flashlights, not reflecting it. It didn't look like the work of human hands, but like something that had been grown or cast. But the most terrifying thing for any Egyptologist was that it bore not one familiar symbol, not one hieroglyph that declared, "I, the great ruler of Egypt, Neb-heren." Not one line from the Book of the Dead to protect him in the next world. Nothing. It was the ultimate violation of all funerary rules. The sarcophagus was anonymous. Only a single, thin, and elegant engraving adorned the center of the massive lid. It was not a portrait of the pharaoh. It was a simple, stylized symbol. A falcon with its wings spread wide, soaring among a scattering of small dots representing stars. Not the god Horus, but just a falcon. Not a god, but a symbol. Not a history, but a direction. And in this cold, empty tomb, standing before the silent black monolith, the team began to realize that they had not just found a pharaoh's tomb, they had found a mystery that was far older and deeper than Egypt itself.
A heavy, oppressive silence fell over the burial chamber. The air, so recently filled with the adrenaline of anticipation, now felt thick and heavy with disappointment. So many years of searching, so many months of titanic labor. For what? For empty walls and an anonymous sarcophagus. With heavy hearts, Dr. Sharma and her team came to the only logical, though depressing, conclusion. The tomb was unfinished. It happened. A pharaoh could die suddenly on a campaign or from an illness, and the priests would have to bury him in a hurry using whatever was ready. This basalt monolith was probably just a temporary sarcophagus, which they later planned to replace with something more fitting, but for some reason never did. All the treasures, statues, and paintings, they simply never had time to create them. Their greatest discovery of the century was turning into a boring footnote in the history books. KV 65, unfinished tomb of the pharaoh Neb-heren, presumed empty. But even in that case, the mummy should have been inside the sarcophagus. It was the last thing they had to check. Using a portable winch and sturdy straps, the workers hooked on to the massive basalt lid. The mechanism groaned under the strain, breaking the millennia-old silence. Slowly, centimeter by centimeter, the multi-ton slab began to rise. The team members crowded around, holding their breath. Their flashlights were pointed inside. Everyone expected to see one thing: the silhouette of a royal mummy in its linen wrappings, covered with amulets and jewelry. The lid rose high enough to look inside, and nothing. The sarcophagus was empty. Absolutely, sterilely empty. Not only was there no mummy, there were no fragments of funerary goods, no scraps of linen bandages, not even the dust of ages. The bottom of the basalt box was as smooth and polished as its outer walls. It was a complete failure, a fiasco. Dr. Sharma closed her eyes, mentally saying goodbye to a sensational discovery. She was about to announce to the team that their work here was done, and all that lay ahead were long months of tedious paperwork describing the strangest and most disappointing tomb in history. It was at that moment, as the collective despair reached its peak, that a young assistant, standing on the other side of the sarcophagus and shining his flashlight at the raised lid from a sharp angle, suddenly froze. His flashlight trembled. Doctor. He was quiet, unsteady. Shine your lights here, on the lid, the inside. Several powerful beams converged on the massive slab, which was still hanging in the air. What they saw made everyone stop mid-sentence, and then a collective choked gasp echoed through the chamber. It was not a gasp of surprise. It was a gasp of shock, mixed with the horror of confronting the impossible. They were literally stunned into silence. On the smooth inner surface of the lid, which could only be seen by whoever lay inside the sarcophagus, was carved the most incredible and heretical thing imaginable in a pharaoh's tomb. By canon, it should have been an image of the sky goddess Nut embracing the deceased, protecting him in eternity. But this was not Nut. It was a map. An unmistakably recognizable, cold and mathematically precise map. A map of our solar system. Forgetting protocol, the team members crowded around the slab, shining their lights on it from all angles, trying to find a mistake, trying to convince themselves their eyes were deceiving them. But there was no deception. The image was cold, precise, and unmistakable. This was no primitive drawing. It was a complex, calibrated diagram. In the center of the composition was a large disk from which thin rays emanated, the sun. But the most incredible part began beyond it. Around this central disk, in almost perfect, elongated elliptical orbits, were other spheres. Closest to the center was a tiny ball, Mercury. Behind it, a larger sphere, almost the same size as the third, Venus. The third planet from the center was depicted with special detail. Next to it was engraved another, very small ball orbiting it, the Earth, and its moon. This fact alone overturned everything we know about Egyptian cosmology. The Egyptians, like all ancient peoples, believed in a geocentric system, where a flat, motionless Earth was the center, and the sun, moon, and planets revolved around it. But here was a heretical, unthinkable model for that era, a heliocentric model, where Earth was just one of the planets orbiting the sun. But the relief continued. The fourth sphere, Mars. The fifth was huge, much larger than all the previous ones, and on its surface was carved a faint oval, an unmistakable hint of Jupiter's great red spot. The sixth sphere was the most striking. It was surrounded by a thin, distinct ring, Saturn. This was a shock. Yes, the ancient Egyptians were brilliant astronomers. They created one of the earliest solar calendars. They watched the stars to predict the flooding of the Nile. But their knowledge was limited to what they could see with the naked eye. They knew of the 5 wandering stars, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. But they did not know that Earth was one of them, and they certainly couldn't have known about Saturn's rings, which were first seen only in 1610 by Galileo, after the invention of the telescope. But even this incredible layer of knowledge was not the end of the mystery, because after Saturn, on the most distant, outermost orbits of this stone map were carved 2 more planets, 2 distant dim spheres whose existence the ancient world could not have even guessed: Uranus and Neptune. Let's stop and just consider the timeline. This tomb was sealed around 1350 BC. The planet Uranus, a faint ice giant invisible to the naked eye, was officially discovered by astronomer William Herschel in 1781 with a powerful telescope. The planet Neptune is even more distant and dim. Its existence was first predicted purely mathematically based on irregularities in Uranus's orbit and only then confirmed by observation in 1846. How, in the name of all the gods of Egypt, could planets be depicted on the inside of a sarcophagus lid buried under tons of rock and sealed for 3,500 years when humanity would only learn of their existence at the end of the 18th and middle of the 19th centuries? It was impossible. It should not exist. This image was not just an anomaly, it was a silent rebuke to all of official history. It screamed that someone in the Bronze Age possessed knowledge that our civilization would only attain 3,000 years later with the development of optics, mathematics, and celestial mechanics. This was a map from the future found in the distant past. So what could it mean? Faced with an artifact that shouldn't exist, archaeologists and historians found themselves at a dead end. Their entire neat worldview had collapsed, and in this void, 3 main theories were born, each one more insane than the last. Theory 1. A remarkable coincidence. This is the official, safest, and most unsatisfying version. According to it, modern science has simply fallen victim to its own imagination. Skeptics argue that we are seeing what we want to see, that this is not a map, but a complex religious or mythological symbol that we cannot yet decipher. The central disk is not the sun, but the god Ra. The spheres are not planets, but perhaps different levels of the underworld, the Duat, or the souls of the Pharaoh's ancestors. But this theory begins to fall apart when we look at the details. Fine, let's say they are just random circles, but why are there exactly 9 counting from the center? Why are they arranged in elliptical orbits, not perfect circles? Why does the 6th circle have ears so similar to rings, and the 3rd has a small satellite? The number of coincidences is so great that it borders on statistical impossibility. To call this mere coincidence is to turn a blind eye to facts that are screaming at us. Theory 2. The legacy of the lost. This theory is much bolder and more romantic. It states that the ancient Egyptians, for all their greatness, were not the first. They were inheritors of the knowledge of an even ancient, highly advanced civilization, which we might loosely call Atlanteans or a pre-cataclysmic civilization. According to this version, a global culture of seafarers and astronomers existed on Earth thousands of years before the Egyptians, one that had mapped the Earth and knew the structure of the solar system. But as a result of a global cataclysm, an asteroid impact, a polar shift, or a great flood, this civilization was almost completely destroyed. The surviving groups scattered across the planet, trying to preserve the remnants of their knowledge. They passed it on to the primitive tribes of the time, from whom the civilizations of Sumer, Egypt, and India would later grow. In this worldview, the Egyptian priests were guardians of sacred knowledge that they themselves did not fully understand. The map on the sarcophagus lid was not their discovery. It is a relic, the last surviving fragment of the wisdom of a perished world, which they placed in the tomb of their most celestial Pharaoh as the highest sacred object. But there is a third, most incredible and most frightening theory. It begins where the others end. It suggests we stop looking for explanations on Earth. It suggests we lift our eyes to the sky and remember all the strange things we've encountered. Remember the Pharaoh's name, Neb-heren, Lord of the Sky. Remember the almost complete lack of mention of him in history, as if his name was not just forgotten, but deliberately erased to hide something dangerous. Remember the empty sarcophagus. Remember the map, carved not on the outside for all to see, but on the inside, like a personal message for the one who was meant to lie there. What if his title was not just a metaphor, but a literal job description? What if his obsession with the stars was not just the curiosity of a scholar, but a longing for home? What if the knowledge of the solar system was not inherited or calculated, but received? This theory states that Neb-heren was not human in the fullest sense of the word, or at least he was of a different kind, and his death was not an end, but a return. That the empty sarcophagus means not that he wasn't buried, but that his body was never meant for decay in this tomb. That his path did not lead to the dark underworld of the duet, but back to the stars, whose map he left as the only, final proof of his origin. And then the whole picture falls into place. The tomb isn't a crypt, it's a memorial, an empty monument to a contact that once took place, and the erased name is a desperate attempt by later Orthodox priests to hide this heretical truth that could have destroyed the foundations of their faith and power. We may never know for sure. The artifact from the tomb of Neb-heren is classified and studied in secret labs, but its existence is a fact that forces us to ask the ultimate question: what else are the sands of time hiding from us, and what will we stumble upon the next time we dig a little deeper? So, what do you think? Was it the legacy of a forgotten civilization, an incredible coincidence, or proof of contact? Write your theory in the comments below. And if you enjoy mysteries like this, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. There are many more journeys into the unknown ahead. Thanks for watching.